Okay, Simon, my two questions. The first of them, what are the most important things that you've gained from today that you think should be carried away home by all of us?
Well, I'd like to draw attention to a question, I think, that was posed by Andrew Gold, almost in passing, really. The question is, can creative industries replace financial services as London's economic motor? Now, that for me is the closest we've got today to an underlying economic strategic rationale for this project. Apart from the fact that BBC's here, the land is available and so on, why would we want to do all this? And I think that we're going to need that. I think this whole sector is going to need that. If we were to meet again at the end of the week after the budget, I think the tone in the room would be rather different. And I think if we were to meet again in the autumn, and we'll see what the stock market does by then, again, I think the tone in the room would be rather different. We're going to need fundamental economic strategic rationales for projects of this kind.
Is it all or nothing between financial services and creative, or is there just a shift in balance in the nature of the city?
No, of course not. And as other speakers have said, this term creative industries, creative economy is a moving feast, and I would certainly include and encourage the crossover with all forms of medical research and so on. But essentially IP-based, knowledge-based work has got to be forming the bedrock of London's economy over the coming years.
And what, hard question to answer, I know, what design implications does that have? What does it mean for the city?
Design implications for the site?
For the city?
For the city.
Yeah. Is it the same old stuff, just piled up in a different colour? Or is it something totally different?
No, it's not the same old stuff. But what is required, I think, are not the large, iconic tower blocks that we saw in Canary Wharf and we've seen in the City of London. We need something, again, as others have spoken to, that's much more fine-grained, it's integrated with a community, it's connected with education, it's connected with tourism, it's connected with art, it's bringing people, it's bringing networks together. It's simply not going to develop the London economy by putting up tall buildings and hoping that big firms will come in and become the anchor tenants for them. There's got to be a much more, fine-grained, detailed, human-based approach to regeneration.
That's right. Different texture, different permeability.
Yes.
Despina, what have you gained from today? What have you learned?
Well, I thought the opening this morning was very interesting because Paul talked about facilitating clustering of the creative industries. And then Caroline talked about creating a global symbol for creative regeneration. And I like the variable use of the word creative, because if we think about creative in the sense of challenging the usual way of doing things, I think that is probably the biggest issue about this site. How do we challenge the usual way of doing things? And I think that would be at every level. I'd like to kind of paraphrase Ellen Yentov's wonderful closing. He used the 3 C's of creating, collaborative, and community, and I would say the way to do it is by being creative through collaborating with both the physical and the virtual community that makes up not just the BBC, but all of the creative industries and interested stakeholders of this site.
And that creative, in this very wide sense, goes well beyond the arts or the media kind of form of creativity.
Absolutely. So I think that the Imperial College example of creative is absolutely the same notion of creative. But from a site point of view, the challenge is, how do we actually challenge the usual way of doing things? There was a lot of talk about working differently. Not necessarily everyone was convinced that this was really happening. There's an awful lot of talk about technology being different. And certainly we know from the work we've done in London that the scene-changing developments that happened in London over 20 years ago happened because of very fundamental technology changes. The computer came into the building. Well, the computer certainly has left the building. It's in all of our pockets, and it's either in our pocket or it's become infrastructure. So in both those ways, the computer has become a layer and a virtual entity. What does it mean for the places we create? So I think whilst I agree with the notion of graining of the site, there's a bigger argument about how do we fund development that actually should be based around collaboration. I don't think it's one or the other. It's not hot desking or sitting at your desk. It's both. It's the ability of creating complexity that's going to drive this development to be successful. So I think it opens up a huge set of challenges for us to create the future.
Yeah, and following the models of the past is likely to be dangerous.
Well, I actually think that it would be catastrophic for the BBC and for London, because I don't think that, I think it would be a huge missed opportunity to build buildings based on the BCO guidelines or the funding standards that we've seen for the last 20 years. Because we need to be thinking about what are the places, the buildings and the urban environments that actually will support serendipitous interaction, collaboration, blurring of virtual and physical encounters, which is what will bring together new ideas, formulate creativity, whether it's in the media, the university, the medical world, or whatever that creativity happens in, and the BBC being that catalyst for it.
Okay. Leonard, the lawyer.
Yes, well, as
I'm not implying that you're not creative.
Well, if I take that as a complete compliment,
yes.
What I can say is, of course, my profession ranks as the pessimists amongst us all, and I say that not to be pessimistic beyond belief, but to say that the thing that's come out for me today is how difficult this project will be. And there is often a mismatch between the clear ambition and the clear passion to get some of these things done, and the reality of getting them done. Anyone, as I have, who's been involved in the Emerging Thames Gateway will know of the enormous challenges that have been faced there. It's not so difficult here because you've got the local authority. You haven't got a sort of complete web of agencies and local authorities with a variety of planning powers as you do there.
Bit smaller too.
Bit smaller too.
Yeah.
You also have the advantage that in London, one of the recent pronouncements has been the prospective abolition of the government minister for London, and therefore, Dave's saying to Boris, just get on with it. And that's, I think, a great advantage. But I'm slightly apologetic about this because on the planning side, my firm bears all the hallmarks of guilt on the delays in planning since Lewis Silkin was the man who brought in the 47 Planning Act. And we still have an environment in which there is a lack of predictability and lack of certainty in planning. And that is an absolute requirement for the investors who will underpin the capital investment here, as well as the landowners and the visionaries to get on with. I mean, I think, in a sense, we're labelling this as a how do we get this right session to some extent. And I think there are a number of key features that I would just take a moment from my own experience as a development lawyer, that will come into some of the things people are going to have to look at. Anticipation, people are going to have to address the likely issues at the very earliest opportunity. Good communication is very, very important. You've got to have a clear and comprehensive set of discussions between all the players on the developers team, with the council and the other stakeholders, including the tenants that will be looking at this opportunity with great interest. Teamwork is critical. Understanding the roles of every